Welcome to Power Lunch Live from the road this week. I am in Wilmington, North Carolina, working on a big project down here, but taking our lunch times to chat with our guest on the program today is going to be Jim Kerr, and we're going to talk about storytelling and culture in his new book, Indispensable, which will be out in January. The whole point of Power Lunch Live is to have today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, those who are making a difference in the world, who are doing amazing work that we can learn from. So that's why we do this program. Now, a couple fun things about this. We are on LinkedIn Live. We are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, probably another channel or two that I don't even know, since that's not my thing. But we monitor all those channels during the program. And what we want you to do is get on the keyboard and type a question, interact with our guest so that you get to learn what you need to learn. You can take what you need from this conversation. So please do that. And so the other thing is give the program a like or share if you like the program. We hope you like it so that your network can benefit from these conversations as well. Today I've got Jim Kerr. Jim is one of today's foremost thinkers on organizational design and culture transformation. And he is he's got his fifth book. I think Indispensable is his sixth book out. And so it's, one of the books we're going to talk about today, It's Good to Be King. That's one of the latest one, I think, before Indispensable. We're going to talk about leadership today. We're going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about storytelling. Jim, welcome to the program.
Rhett, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's good. I'm glad you were able to do it. I know it's been a busy couple of months. So, I've got to ask, and I'm sure everybody's asking you this question right off the bat, but I guess I won't be any different than anybody else. How do you think COVID is changing leadership and changing organizations?
Well, yes. The thing about this was it was pretty much it came out of left field, right? No one really expected it. And we offer services like scenario planning and the like to help businesses better anticipate how they would react to situations should they arise. But certainly the last 6 months has shown that most organizations didn't have scenario plans, or if they did, they certainly didn't have scenario plans that dealt with a worldwide pandemic. So consequently, the pressure's on leaders to sort of reinvent how they lead. And I think what we're seeing is more and more leaders taking steps that they maybe would not have taken in ordinary times to remain at the helm, to be able to provide the direction setting and the management of change necessary for their businesses to get through this crisis. And I think it's put a lot of pressure there.
I know that I was on a conference call right at the beginning of this, and I remember the head of Ford Motor Company, and he said, look, we had planned for everything. We had planned for plants to be shut down. We planned for natural disasters, but we never planned for a worldwide shutdown. That just wasn't in the master sort of disaster plan, right? And so I think you're absolutely right. For you, what do you think are the characteristics of companies that survive events like this, that really thrive and come out of these things even stronger? Are there some things that you see that are sort of key success factors or sort of traits that companies have that come out of these better?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the overarching thing, in my opinion anyway, is culture. If you had a good, strong, solid culture, you've got the ability to be resilient during these kind of unexpected times. If your culture is a little weaker, if you don't have sort of strength of character baked into the way you're organized and the way you operate, then I think all bets are off. Where you end up could be someplace you really didn't want to be or would have predicted. So I think the companies that are likely to survive the best are the ones that have really good, solid cultures that allow people to be resilient, that promote the notion of being in it together, that drive collaboration. Um, and I think those are the ones that you're going to see make it.
Yeah, don't disagree with that at all. So let's talk about indispensable. You've just finished this book, and we were talking before we came on how you had just finished it right before COVID came along. Talk about the book a little bit. Tell us about it.
Sure, it's called Indispensable. It's the subtitle is How to Build and Lead a Company Customers Can't Live Without. There's over 50 industry examples, many of them from my consulting practice. A lot of them are industry stories. And the idea is to help the reader learn from these leaders that have built these kinds of companies that people prefer over anyone else in the marketplace. So I'm talking about Salesforce, Amazon, and the like. Those are the businesses that people prefer, and the reason that they prefer them are varied. But what I present in the book is actually a framework, and I suggest it's these 6 things that you really have to be excellent at in order to build such a company and lead such a company.
What are those factors?
Well, it really starts with leadership, and it's there that you're going to see, a differentiation. People that have strong leadership build leaders behind them. They've got the ability to continue to promote from within, and they know when to move out and bring in new talent and forge new ways of operating. Then it kind of moves to a vision. You've got to have a really solid vision and help people understand what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go. Make it so compelling, so vivid that everybody in the organization recognizes their role and how they'll be successful by helping you achieve it. Then culture's next. Having the right culture becomes really imperative. As I mentioned earlier, if you build a kind of culture that allows people to be resilient and vibrant, then chances are good you're going to drive the company to a place where you're preferred in your markets. Then it goes on to the right people. That's sort of the 4th item. And then around that, there's sort of finer points around empowerment and trust. You've got to have a high trust organization with a high trust culture. And then finally, the last piece is change management practices. I'm a real strong believer that organizations are constantly changing. They're living organisms, and consequently, you need good, solid change management practices in order to make the kind of pivots that are necessary to remain vital in the marketplace. So it's those sort of 6 things that I talk about in the book.
Why is that? And I think every organization struggles, and I want to talk about that change management piece, right? Because I think why is that so hard to people get their head around? Because it's if you're not thinking about what's next, if you're not thinking about your competition, if you're not thinking about, but that seems to always be in a lot of my coaching work and a lot of the transformation and the change management work I do, that seems to be a really tough piece for people to get right. Why do you think that?
Well, I think what it is it's sort of Groundhog Day in a lot of instances. In certain of the organizations that I work with, it's sort of, they've got a new change, and where do we begin? How do we do it? We got to make another change. Where do we begin? How do we do it? So In the book, I talk about the idea of having frameworks in place that are reusable, that you continually apply these same practices as you drive change. And then it becomes a lot easier. You're not inventing it every time. You're actually applying good rigor and discipline as you drive change and transform your organization.
And where should that sit? Because that's another thing I work with companies on. And is that something that should, if let's say you have a change management leader or change management team, should that sit? Should that sit under the CEO? Should that sit under a particular C-suite vertical? I mean, where do you think that should sit?
Well, there's sort of a couple of elements, I think, in your question, Rhett, and I appreciate the question because it's going to give me a chance to sort of play around with the notion a bit. But firstly, you absolutely must have executive participation and commitment to all your change efforts. You really can't drive them bottom up. It really requires a top-down commitment to make the change. So executive sponsorship can shift across the organization depending on where the changes are happening and the kinds of adjustments and transformations you've got to make. But you absolutely must have an executive behind the effort. As far as a team that's centered on change, my gut tells me that every C vertical should have players that are driving change within them. Okay.
Right.
So I don't really see a team per se, though I think that can work. In some instances, it can work. But I really believe that you've got to drive it from within a bit. And the way to do that is to get subject matter experts, people that really understand what the business is about within their particular area of expertise, and train them up, get them using the methodology. But we have one methodology across the concern, right? But have everybody involved in change learn that and cultivate experts from within the organization.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. And so you're saying I appreciate that. It's not just a team you have off to the side. You're actually trying to train people up in each one of each one of the areas, right? So that it sort of filters down through the organization as a mentality, as a culture. It helps build that into the culture.
You got it. Yeah, you're a culture expert, right?
No, it's always good to talk these things. It's always good to talk these things out. So
you've got to. Now, to your point, you've got to bake it into the culture, and I think that's what we're missing. And maybe to that earlier question, that's an element of why is it so hard? Sometimes we haven't baked it in right yet, So yes, and that a lot of the stuff that we do, within the consulting business is to help people learn by doing. So in our model, in indispensable consulting, we don't go in and bring the Mongolian hordes with us. We're not going to take over your company with hundreds of MBA students, with very little business experience. Instead, we're going to have a couple of people that really have done it for many, many years. We're going to cultivate a team of players from within, right? And then we're going to show them how to do it. We're going to bring the methods and the practices and the techniques and so on. And when they're done, they will have co-created the solution for the business. And guess what happens when you do it that way? When it's co-created, the buy-in. Thank you, Rhett. You're a good straight man. The buy-in happens because it's their ideas. You've enabled people from within the organization to recommend changes, and they'll see the implementation of those changes because they've got skin in the game. It's their ideas, right?
Right.
So that's a real plus. And then the second sort of value of doing it this way, learning by doing, is you've got people that can then do it themselves. You've in essence taught them how to fish, so they can do it themselves. So that's kind of the way we've been doing it for the last 30 years. And I find that the clients come back for more because they realize that we are going to come in, we're going to solve the problem, and we're going to help bring their people up with us, through the processes that we use.
What's the value? I know the answer to this, but I always like to ask people like yourself this question. What's the value as a CEO or a leader or founder of bringing somebody in from the outside? I know you talked a little bit about it in the last book about bringing people from the outside, and I find that question fascinating. What's the value you see in that?
Well, there's a it's sort of multifaceted, right? But the very first thing is you've got an objective third party that's outside of the games being played within the organization. They've got nothing more to gain except more business, really, right? But they're not looking for a promotion. They don't want to, climb up the ladder and climb over people and so on. So that outside perspective is really valuable. And what we preach is, you don't have to be an industry expert either. If you've got good practices and methodologies and approaches, you can use experts from within the industry that you're working in to help you drive change and even develop strategy, right? I think the mistake that I see a lot of, senior leaders make is they default to the big companies that have the big industry expertise, and they bring those folks in to drive their strategies and transformation efforts. But guess what happens when you do that? The best outcome you could possibly ask for is exactly what your competition is doing. If they're industry experts, because this management consultants are sort of like bees pollinating flowers, right? We're hopping along and doing our thing. But if we take the ideas that we've built as an industry expert, and here goes the finger quotes, right? But if we do that, and we bring it from one place to the next, the best you can hope for is the same answer that was given to your competitor. But if you go the other route and you say, okay, we've got an approach to solving this problem, we're not exactly sure what the answer is going to be because we're working it through with you, and you give us some of the players that understand your business, understand your internal politics, get your product or service, they're likely to come up with some pretty creative ways to sort of skin the banana, if you will. Mm-hmm. And that's what you want to get out of an engagement with a consultant. So I think the objective point of view is one thing, and then techniques that will get the best out of your people is the other thing that an outsider can bring to the table.
Yeah, I totally get that. What is for you? Well, you know what? I'm going to ask you about the last book because I found it fascinating the way that you sort of turned it into a parable, and it was more like I think Sandy All called it a bedtime story for adults.
Yeah,
or for leaders, I guess. I think that's what he said. I think that's what I remember here reading from him. But so, what is for you? I mean, why did you write it like that? What was the impetus to write that the book in that way?
I'll tell you what, Rhett. I mean, there's so many leadership books out there, right?
Yeah, they're few. Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt like, look, the basic principles are driven out of, I think, first and foremost, character. The best leaders have strong, high integrity characters, right? And you can write a book about that and you can say it, but how do I get people to really get it? So I thought, why not build a parable? Why not create a fable? And it's again, the book's called "It's Good to Be King," and the notion is that this king inherits the throne, doesn't particularly want to be king, but it's thrust upon him. Like right. A lot of times that happens in business, right? And where do we begin? The kingdom's in peril. There's other kingdoms that want to take them over. The people are disgruntled. There's been a long line of bad kings before, our main character inherits the throne. So what does he do? And magically a wizard shows up, right? I.e. a consultant, and becomes an advisor and helps the king think through what has to happen to bring the kingdom back to its previous glory. And then it goes on from there. And the way I wrote it, you've got the cute little story in there, but at the end of each section, you've got a list of, sort of 10 takeaways that will apply to anybody. And the other thing with the book, and this is something I was trying to get at, I don't know if I was really successful or not, but my thought was, if I write it this way, I might be able to get it brought into high schools. A younger reader could read this and start to learn basic leadership principles.
Right.
I could think about it as an audience might be a civic leader, a mayor of a town, has got a bunch of constituents that they've got to influence. So again, good leadership principles are baked into the book. So the idea was not just get it to a business reader, but literally anybody leading in society in any way, the coach of the baseball team, community leaders and so on. So that was the idea.
I did like the 10 tips that are the endings of each of the chapters, sort of filled with some takeaways. What are some of those takeaways from you? Because I think the book is very much a story about transformation, and we started the whole program of talking about that in a sense. What are your biggest takeaways for leaders in the book, you think?
Well, again, the early in the book, it starts out with cultivating a vision that people can embrace. And the key part of what the king and the wizard do is they're able to tell a story in such a compelling way that they start to get the members of the kingdom excited about the possibilities. They could see themselves living a better life by buying into this vision for the kingdom. So I think one of the very first things, and I think this is true for all leaders, is start with a compelling vision. Help people get excited about what you're trying to do there. Get them involved. And if they're engaged, now you've got, a 10 force multiplier, So that was one of the main sort of beginning points in the book. And then there's a lot of stuff about just being decent, right?
Oh, that kind of thing.
Yeah, return to decency. It's not about I'm the king and therefore you'll do it. It's more about we've got a problem. How do we solve it? And you saw throughout the book that the king engaged people in solving the problems for the kingdom. And
is that
back to leadership, they owned it. The players there owned the solution because it was their ideas.
How do you, one of the things that's coming up quite a bit these days is tough conversations, right? And how to have them, and the necessity to have them so that you can have those sort of breakthrough moments. How do you get your clients, how do you get people to sit down and actually have those tough conversations and work through those in a productive way? Because I don't know, with the way we are today, I hate to say it that way, but it seems like everybody takes it personally.
Yeah.
And how do you get those breakthrough moments?
Well, again, you're going to have a tough conversation because somebody's not behaving the way you need them to behave. So it's about behavior, right? Whether it's somebody slacking off on the job or making mistakes or distracted or whatever, it's behavior. So what you've got to do and first of all, I'd say prepare for a tough conversation. That's kind of in the executive coaching work that I do, we work on preparation. So you're not winging any of it. right?
Right.
You're going in prepared. But the idea is to be able to show that the behavior, not the person so much, but the behavior is creating this issue for the organization, and help the person connect the dots so they can see, like, yeah, when they slack off, they create more work for coworkers, or they create mistakes and the customer has to return something, or there's rework involved, or whatever, and show the actual sort of cost of the behavior that's not the best. And then change comes from within. At least I'm a strong believer in that, firm believer in that. I can't change you, you can't change me, but we can change, and the change has to be driven from within. So if we start with behavior and tie it back to what we're trying to accomplish together as part of the team, then it becomes something that the person who's the receiver of the tough message has to wrestle with. They're going to have to come to grips with either I'm going to change, I'm going to show up on time, I'm going to work harder, I'm going to make less mistakes, I'm going to be less distracted, whatever the case may be, because I want to. And I want to because it has this impact. So I think it's helping people see all of that.
And I guess a follow on to that kind of question is, I often see executives, the C-suite, executive teams, not having those conversations they need to have as well. And yes. So how do you get them to have the courage to do that? I guess the same principle applies, but how do you get everybody to step up and actually be open and not sit here with your arms crossed and not say what you have to say?
Right.
But because I think that, again, you can't, it's hard to move forward when you've got to deal with sticky issues, and you've got to be able to say to somebody and disagree with somebody.
Yes.
And then get through that.
Right.
So how do you get that C-suite to do the same thing and have that courage?
Well, it is a really big challenge, and it's something that I know you and I work on regularly with our clients, is to kind of have that breakthrough happen. But I think the trick of it is they've got to want to do it. There has to be this desire to be better. If they don't want to do it, you're never going to get them there. So you've got to create a compelling reason why it's important for them to be honest with each other and confront, tough issues. If there isn't a compelling reason, then you're going to get this folded arm kind of routine,
Yeah.
And, so it starts with desire. And then I think once you've got that, and you can contrive it too, right? You can create the magical enemy on the outside of the four walls and remind them all that, look, you're on the same team. The enemy's not within our team.
And we're under siege, right?
Yeah, right. So you can do that. And I think it's part of what we do, right, as advisors. But they've got to have a reason. And then once they have a reason, then you can bring in different techniques to help break down the barriers to communication. Things like 360s are really simple, been around forever, but a lot of times it's an effective way to break through, because there tends to be some narcissists in the C-suite. And
yeah, a few.
And if you're really a narcissist, then you think you're incapable of doing anything wrong and incapable of being poorly judged for your behavior. But if you do sort of this 360, more an anonymous, you don't know who's saying what, but you get a lot of feedback, that can kind of break down that resistance to hearing the message. And then you use that as a tool to help get the breakthrough to happen. Because ultimately what you want to have, high performing teams are able to call each other out. And you really want to build a high performance team in the C-suite, right? So that's
what I was getting at, is you really want to be able to call each other out and not take it personally, right?
Right. It's about winning. It's not about you. It's about winning.
Yeah.
About us winning.
Yeah. And that's Boy, that's the heart of it right there. So, what are you? Last question. What are you excited about right now in the market? What you're looking at what's going on. What are you excited about, and what scares you right now?
Well, getting on a plane scares me a bit.
Fair enough.
As someone who's lived, 30 years in the air, it's. I think we've got to overcome a few things, right, to be able to get back to any kind of thing where we're face to face and doing work together, in that way. So I guess, I won't call it a real fear. I do believe we're going to solve this issue, but I think that it's of concern, right? It's hard to drive business. I'm in a growth stage here. I've got a new book coming out. I want to drive new consulting, new coaching, and so on. But it's hard to do it when you can't visit the client, when or the prospect. So there's that. But what am I hopeful about? And I wrote a white paper on this. It's on my website for download, indispensable-consulting.com. Got a plug in there.
Absolutely. Get it in there.
But you can download this thing. And what I talk about in the white paper is this, and this is what I'm kind of interested about in seeing. It talks about the idea of becoming the greatest generation 2.0. Now, we know the greatest generation is the World War II generation and so on.
Right.
But we have this opportunity too. And if we can bring our best selves forward, if we can operate with high levels of integrity, we have the opportunity to be the next greatest generation. And I'm really looking forward to us making that turn together and driving to, a place where we can be proud of the way we handled this pandemic, this once in a lifetime kind of, once in 100-year kind of event, that we got through it together and that, we were better for it.
Well, we will put the indispensable.com, right? Indispensable.com or
indispensable-consulting.com. Yep.
Okay. We'll put that in the feed so that people can get a direct link to it. Great. And hopefully, I guess they can pre-order the book there, I'm hoping. Or is that coming?
You know what? Amazon actually has it. So
okay, good.
You can pre-order from Amazon. Not to plug Amazon, but why not?
But why not? Hey, the book's there, so
they're indispensable.
That's right. They have made themselves so.
True.
And thank you so much for being on the program today. This is Power Lunch Live. You can check out the schedule at powerlunch.live, and you can check out Jim's new book, Indispensable. We're going to put the link up after the program for pre-orders. That's going to come out in January. Highly recommend going back and reading some of the other books. The last is Good to Be King. That's already out and available for you to peruse and read. And again, thank you for being with us today here on Power Lunch Live. Jim, thank you very much.
Rhett, thank you. It was really fun. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right.